You're watching Pyro Media Network.
Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We hope your experience is fruitful. Please feel free to visit our website to find out how you can join our growing family. While we are loading your experience, please do us a quick favor and hit that like button from whichever platform you're watching or listening on. Also, share so others may enjoy as well. And we hope you would consider hitting that subscribe or follow button so you can check out more of our amazing content. Alright, let's start the show. Hello everyone. Before we begin, we want to provide a brief trigger warning for our audience. This episode contains discussions and content that may be disturbing or triggering to some viewers and listeners. Topics may include specific triggers such as violence, abuse, mental health issues, etc. Your well-being is important to us. If you feel overwhelmed or need to step away at any point, please take care of yourself. Additionally, we encourage anyone who may need support to reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional. Remember, it's okay to prioritize your mental and emotional health. Thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate your understanding and support. Now, let's get started with today's show.
Hey, good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for joining my show. It's just Kim, live, okay? Live. I am so excited tonight that you are here for one thing. And then secondly, that I have these two amazing young ladies that are here with me tonight because we're going to talk about what we're going to have a mental health moment. And we're going to be talking about mental health from a Gen Zer's perspective. I feel like they took a lot of hits during the pandemic and some other times in our lives when all these cell phones, smartphones, took place and all this stuff that started happening around their, in their generation around the time they were growing up. These things just kind of like capture us. They almost take over. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I get glued to my cell phone. So I can only imagine how that is for a young person. So tonight, I'm going to talk to Zion, Ervin, my daughter, my baby, the youngest. And then I have Brenae Seals, who's going to join me as well. And tonight, we're going to have a very open, transparent, honest talk about mental health. So let's go ahead and bring them in. Hey there, how are you?
Hey, how about yourself?
Hey, I'm here, I'm alive. I'm in my right mind, I'm feeling good in my body. So I'm okay. How about you all?
I'm good. I feel good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
I'm in a good place. Can't complain.
That's good. And I like the fact that you said I'm in a good place, because sometimes we're not in a good place. Sometimes we're in a not so good place. Sometimes people say, oh, don't say bad, but sometimes we're in a not so good place. And I think for such a long time, we have not been very honest about that. But I want to thank God that the two of you are here with me tonight. And we are going to be honest. We're going to be honest about you as a Generation Z person who has had some struggles with mental health. And I think the stigma of all of that has really been something that has kind of held people back from getting the help that they need. Because, back in the day, I know when I was growing up, people did not believe in therapy. They didn't believe in going to the psychiatrist or the psychologist or counselor. They said, oh, you must be crazy. Well, no, I'm not crazy. Okay. But I just need some help with some stuff that I have going on in my life. So I'm so happy that this generation is more open to all of that. But before we get started with some different questions that I have for you, I have something I want to read. Okay. And I want to get your opinion about this. Okay.
Okay.
It says, and this was written in January 2022. Okay. So think about what was going on in January 2022, right? Nearly 2 years after the COVID-19 pandemic began in the United States, Gen Zers ranging from middle school students to early professionals were reporting high rates of anxiety, depression, and distress than any other age group. The mental health challenges among this generation were so concerning during that time. The U.S. Surgeon General issued a public health advisory around December 2021 to address what they called the youth mental health crisis. And they were saying that it was exacerbated by COVID-19. What are your thoughts on that? I think you're muted, Zion.
Yeah, for me personally, I think that sounds about right. I remember I was in high school during the pandemic, so I remember just coming out of that. It was a very interesting time. Of course, it started off as like, oh, we get 2 weeks off, cool, we can go home, do our thing, chill, no homework, all of that. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, it's a few months. Okay, now it's a year, and then now it's 2 years. And so I think for one, all of those transitions from like literally 1 week being in school, having your routine, being around friends, and having life, and then all of a sudden in a week that just changes. I think that causes a lot of anxiety. And then on top of that, you go so long without really socializing, being around people, being around your peers, and then they're like, okay, we open again, so they just expect you to like hop right back into it. And it's like, no, things are different now. Like, I haven't been around people. I haven't had to socialize like that except for family for like 2 years, so acclimating to school and, friends and everything. It was tough, but yeah, I would say, those effects definitely are still, lingering, but, one step at a time. So.
Thank you. Wow, you said a lot. So Bree, what do you think?
Most definitely one step at a time. One of the things that caught my attention when listening to you is just like the fact that it was a crisis. Like, for us to be in a mental health crisis, it means that we need some type of assistance, some type of help, some type of support. And I think in that time frame, I guess we just weren't getting it, even though, like you also mentioned, that, mental health is becoming less of a stigma in our generation. It's still, we were still in a crisis. So
yeah, and you're right. Mental health in your generation is becoming less of a stigma. But someone my generation, I'm a baby boomer. And so in the baby boomer generation, we didn't go for counseling. We didn't, if you got sent to the nurse's office because you needed counseling or anything, everybody was looking at you when you came back, so so it's a lot different for the two of you and your generation than it was definitely for mine. And I think even after me, the Generation X and then the generation Y or millennials, I think they kind of started entering into where, mental health was not so much a stigma. People were a little more open to, dealing with counseling and dealing with therapy and, medication and, people who look down on folks who needed medication, and then in some of our communities, think about it. In some of our communities, we look down on people who put their children on medication. We said, medication? Why does your child need medication? Well, sometimes people need medication. They need something to kind of help balance them, bring all of that's going on inside them to, a quiet place. And so those are things that I think that, played a big role in making, like you said, Zion, that transition. There was a transition that took place. You said there was a transition from being able to go to school, be with your friends, do all these things. And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 years later, now you got to transition back, and there was no real help, was there?
No.
I mean, you think about it. We transitioned back to work. We transitioned back to school, transitioned back to church. We transitioned back to a lot of places, and I think most people really didn't know how to handle that. Didn't know how to handle that. So I'm glad you said that the stigma is not so much. But I think even though it's not as bad as it was maybe in my generation or the generation before you, I think still people, they have a hard time with their families. What do you guys think about that as it relates to mental health and all of that?
Oh, most definitely. I think it is a hard time with your family because you don't want, especially, I'll just talk personal. Coming from a religious background and stuff like that, oh, you can pray it away. You can talk to Jesus, which I think church and praying and all of that is an important part of your toolbox. But I think your toolbox is wider than just prayer and going to church and talking to Jesus. And I think families that grew up, especially in a Black background, who grew up and pray about it, go to church, they shame you for needing medication or needing therapy, or sometimes, oh, that's not real. You're not really going through that. You're too young to be going through that, like that type of thing. And nine times out of 10, that's not true. And two, the generations before us suffered without these things, and they're still suffering with it and still dealing with it because they didn't have the resources that we have today. So
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, agreed. That's definitely a thing, especially within like Black community. Mental health is sometimes overlooked, and I find that oftentimes it's because our symptoms look different, right? Because our environments look, they may be a typical white family. So you may be bipolar, but you don't know you bipolar because maybe your manic state looks a little different than Tim, or Bob, like maybe your are different, and your impulses are towards different things, but you're still in the manic state. But when you go to the doctor, they're like, oh no, I don't think that's manic. You probably just have anger issues. And it's in the Black community, we're kind of perceived different, and we perceive ourselves differently. And then also, just as far as family goes, I know for me, I'm learning to lean more on, family, mom, for my mental health. And, it's been a journey, and it took a lot of hard conversations because I personally found that on my journey, until I understood what was going on with me, it came off. It can sometimes come off the wrong way. It can sometimes come off as standoffish. It can sometimes come off as rude or in a mood, or oh, you stank today, like it could come off as times in our community, in the Black community, like, oh, my mom, she always got an attitude. Maybe she has a mood, you don't know, she got a mood disorder. It's looked at, oh, you have an attitude, or or they don't speak maybe they have social anxiety, you know, like, and it's hard. They want to, but they're trying to think of what to say. By the time they can think of what to say, the moment is missed, you know?
Right, right.
And so I know, like, within our family, it took a lot of conversations, and that kind of like broke down the barriers of like, oh, so that's why when you were younger,
Yes.
you do this, or that's why you didn't really like going here, didn't really like, you know, and it helped you guys to understand me and also helped me to understand myself a little more too. And so I think those conversations are important. It's important to keep the people around you involved. If they are a safe space for you, keep your people involved, you know, letting your partner, your friends, and your family know what's going on with you, where you're at in your diagnosis, how you're feeling, you know, so that they don't perceive it the wrong way, you know, and then you're looking like, oh, well, where's my help? Where's my support? You know, and it's a lot of miscommunication. So, yeah, I think the
Yeah.
communication is a huge part of it, you know, when it comes to mental health and family. So,
Yes, 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 yes. Community, family, all of that plays a huge part. In Zion, you touched on some things, you know, and because we are talking personal, you know, and, you know, even in our own family, there were a lot of things we didn't understand, you know. And so sometimes what do people do when they don't understand something? They make light of it, they make fun of it, you know, they ignore it, you know. It's kind of like, okay, we don't know what to do, so we won't do anything. You know, we'll hide our heads in the sand, you know. And you're right. Many times, you know, we would go, why are you in your room? Why didn't you, you know, come out? We got a house full of people. You know, why aren't you down here with all your family and your cousins and your people? And you were just like, I don't know. I don't want to be down there. You know, we did not understand that because we have always had a big family and we've always had people around all the time. So it
yeah,
made a difference when you made us aware of
yeah,
how those things make you feel.
yeah. And I also wanted to mention something, if that's okay. I know we have to move on, but it's funny because Brenae, my sister, your daughter, we had a conversation the other night, coming from a family member's birthday party, and it was a big gathering of people. And she said, I was like, you know, I had a really good time tonight. And she was like, you know, I did too.
Yeah,
I always have a good time with family. And I said, you know, B, like, I noticed the difference in myself tonight, though, because lately I've been taking some supplements to help with anxiety. And I felt them kick in for the first time that night. Like,
wow.
and it took a moment for me to be in the moment. And then I was like, wait, I was like, usually something like that would trigger some sort of like, because my anxiety is not just mental, it's physical. I feel
Yeah,
physically on a daily basis. Um, and so I was like, I noticed a difference in my body. I feel just here. I feel present. I'm alert. I'm in the moment. I'm able to kiki. You know, I feel comfortable just being me. And I haven't been able to feel like that in such a long time. And I was telling her, like, it felt good to be able to enjoy my family because these are people that I know. My mind knows these people love me, but my body and the anxiety wants to fight against it and wants to make me feel like I'm not
wow.
place. And she said something. She said, you know, Z, she was like, I'm glad you said that because she was like, it's good to know that you do enjoy us because sometimes, like you said, miscommunication is hard to understand. Like, does she enjoy us or why doesn't she enjoy us? You know, and it's easy to take it personal when sometimes
Right.
it's not personal. And she was like, I didn't know it was that physical for you. So like,
Yeah,
it's good to know that you do enjoy us. It's just sometimes your mind, you know, just and your body gets in the way of it. And you know, we had a long conversation about it, and it was just like, wow, I didn't know she felt like that. I didn't know she didn't
yeah,
understand that. Sometimes, like, I'm really dying to like just be and just and kiki with y'all and just be in the moment. But sometimes your mind is just going, you know. And then she got to understand my perspective of like, you know, how it feels sometimes and like how hard, you know, I do try. And so I was
yeah.
just telling her like it's a blessing to like finally start to feel like regulated and like at a, you know, a good state, you know. And so yeah,
You
just
know, Z, I'm so glad you brought that up because I noticed. I was
mm,
at the same party,
right.
okay?
Yeah,
And
Wow.
I noticed, and it
yeah,
made me feel so good. And I was just
yeah.
watching you, just stood back,
Mhm.
you know, because I'm a mom, and I don't want to be like, oh my God, Zion, you feel good, of it, right?
Yeah.
But I noticed, so I'm happy for you. I'm happy that it was successful for you.
Thank
Bree, have you ever been in a situation like that? Have you ever felt anxiety just being around people, or has that ever happened?
Oh, for sure. And at first, I want to say I really appreciate just being in this space with both of you, from like a mom and daughter perspective, because it's just so freeing to see Z being able to express herself in this capacity, and you just receive her the way you are right now. So I really appreciate that. I would say, yeah, definitely around that time of the month for me.
Okay. Yeah.
I would be like, I'm not Bree. Honestly, I'm bubbly, goofy, laughing all the time and stuff like that. But sometimes around my cycle, I'm more tense. And so depending on if it's like a day before my cycle or whatever, I'm just like a little weird. And recently, I was at one of my family's weddings, and I tried something new. I tried 2 acais with some pampering, and that was the like side for me. Like, oh, wow. I could kick it. Okay, I'm cool. You know what I'm saying? So,
wow.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to you and emphasize with you, because sometimes family members don't know what you're going through just to prepare or to go to an event. And some people could just go to an event and be fine, Right. But for some people, it takes a little more effort.
Yes.
So yeah, and sometimes church is early in the morning on Sundays. I got to be there at 8:30, and I don't have time to eat or take my vitamins. So sometimes I'm a little off on Sunday mornings, and people be like, "You all right? You good?" Or they'll just like notice something different or off from my bubbly or happy energy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm perfectly fine. Trust me, once I go home and eat and take my vitamins, I will be great.
Right.
So once I get that food, I'm gonna be all right, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. Let me ask you this. Have you always thought about mental health the way you think about it now? Because I think both of you have a more mature outlook on it, and it's probably because you have had therapy, you've had all these wonderful things that have taken place, you've learned how to cope with some things. Before we get into that question, I think we should go ahead and go to a commercial, because I really want to dive into that. So we're going to go to a commercial. We're going to be right back.
Okay.
Elevate your entertainment with Watch Vim. Discover the ultimate online streaming destination. Get an auto-renewing monthly subscription for unlimited content on all devices. Join us in supporting a Black-owned streaming platform that brings top-tier entertainment. Let the streaming excitement begin at Watch Vim, your seamless experience for endless entertainment. Stream online or download the Watch Vim app now.
Are you ready for enlightening conversations that transcend boundaries? Get ready for Conversations with Clergy, brought to you by the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. In partnership with the world's largest publicly funded international collaboration, the HVTN is dedicated to evaluating vaccines to prevent HIV and COVID-19. But their impact doesn't stop there. The HVTN is at the forefront of advancing vaccinology, social and behavioral sciences, statistics, immunology, and even contributing to the research on tuberculosis and COVID-19 vaccines. By supporting Conversations with Clergy, the HVTN not only brings you thought-provoking discussions, but also contributes to the global effort to combat infectious diseases. Tune in, stay informed, and be a part of the change. Conversations with Clergy, supported by the HVTN, empowering conversations, empowering lives. Join us in this journey of knowledge, understanding, and progress. Conversations with Clergy proudly brought to you by the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, because together we can make a difference.
Okay, so we're back. We're back. So go ahead and hit like, subscribe, share this, because I know you know someone out there that needs to hear what we're talking about tonight. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and like, go ahead and share, go ahead and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. So let's get back to it. So, have you always thought about mental health the way you do today?
Z, you want to go first? Okay. You know what? I think when I was younger, I just didn't understand the difference of mental health, because growing up, I knew of bipolar mental health and I knew of substance abuse mental health, but I didn't know, there was depression, anxiety, just stress, all of those things. I didn't really know that there were such a difference. And now I'm like, okay, there's a difference between bipolar and substance abuse and things like that. So I think it's just now, from then I now know that mental health is so broad, like it's so many different components of mental health. So I'm understanding that now.
Yeah. Same. I definitely feel like I had a much more narrow scope of like what mental health looked like when I was younger, because for one, I mean, when you're young, you don't really understand what mental health is. You don't really understand even what your emotions are. So like tying in like a mental health aspect or label to it, that's why for years I couldn't really understand what was going on with me, because I wasn't even really understanding how I was feeling. And so I would say honestly within the most recent years, and Mom, we've talked about this, but I'm undergoing getting help from an actual like psychiatrist, and she's been able to like diagnose a few things, but one of the more prevalent ones is ADHD. And it's crazy because for one, what a lot of us don't realize is that ADHD, and mental health in general, it can show up so differently, like I said, based on race, and then also based on gender, right? Because from a young age as girls, because we're socialized in a certain way, a lot of our symptoms show up as like emotional dysregulation, because we weren't allowed to be hyper. We weren't allowed to, be like loud, and it's kind of like, just be quiet, relax, stay, but boys, they're allowed to kind of like roughhouse, and just explore more, right? And so because of that, they say oftentimes like a lot of women are misdiagnosed for ADHD, because in the book, they mostly base the diagnosis off of symptoms they find in men. But women, it looks different. It looks more like emotional dysregulation, so a lot of frequent mood swings. And I would wonder why I'm having so many mood swings, but my symptoms don't align with bipolar. I know that's not it. And then, it's many other symptoms as well. But low self-esteem, that's another one that shows up oftentimes in women more so than men, which is why like you'll find some guys, they're like, you're like, well, he doesn't have low self-esteem and he has ADHD. Well, yeah, he's allowed to just kind of be women are not.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
boys, supposed to be ladylike, and we're supposed to, we're the smarter ones, and
Yeah.
oh, don't do that, or but your brother can do whatever, you know and so much of that, we don't realize, we internalize as children, and then we grow up, and then our symptoms, they show up differently, and then we're not able to get the help that we need because we're misdiagnosed so often. And so I would say with that, like with finding out I have ADHD, it took years for me to even think I had ADHD because I have a father who has ADHD. And I'm like, we're similar, but we're different in a lot of ways. Like I'm
Right.
not, and so I'm like, what, ADHD? But then when I started looking into it more, I'm like, wow, it's so broad, and with so many other mental health diagnoses, and disorders or whatever, they're so broad. We really base it off of those 10 symptoms we see when we Google what are the signs you have this, or what are the signs you
Yeah.
have that. And even sometimes when you
Yeah.
go to a psychiatrist, I was misdiagnosed the first time I ever spoke to a psychiatrist.
Wow.
Misdiagnosed for
Yeah.
quite a few things. And sometimes,
Right.
yeah, sometimes it just takes really like educating yourself, and hearing about other people's experience too. I think that helped me a lot to understand mental health more, and how many
Yeah.
different variations of mental health disorders there are.
Right.
But sometimes, listening to a doctor, they're gonna talk to you by the book, but when you hear people's experience, you're like, oh, I relate to that, I understand that, maybe I do.
Right.
So
Right. And with you saying that, what do you think are the most prevalent? And I'm not, I know you both are not doctors or psychiatrists or anything like that, but just being in your generation, being with your peers, what would you say are the most common issues that people deal with?
I would just say anxiety and depression. I see that the most. A lot of people are struggling with anxiety, depression, suicide, the most. And I think anxiety is another broad one, but like social anxiety, physical anxiety with panicking and feeling
Attacks.
sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depression, feeling sad, comparing themselves to other people, because now we see it on social media. They'll be here in Bali, they not living with their parents. They got all this money. Like, how are they doing that? Comparing themselves. So I think those are the main ones.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, like, having anxiety. We talked about that pandemic, and I never, that I knew of, ever experienced anxiety. But after or during that time of the pandemic, I realized that coming out of the pandemic, I did start noticing that I would have anxiety. And sometimes I wouldn't know why it was happening. I really didn't know what was triggering me to feel the way I would feel. My heart would start racing. And like sometimes when I would have to go into, public settings, or I would have to present in front of people, we were working from home, and I was anxious about that at first. And then, just being in social services, sometimes, the show had to go on. So a lot of social workers and a lot of people who work in social services, we still had to show up. Okay. And so there was a lot of anxiety that was wrapped around that, just being in public places with other people. I remember when the pandemic took place, when they first called me at my office and said, hey, pack up as much as you can in your car, enough stuff that you can work from home for a couple weeks, and go home. And I just remember panicking because I honestly, people laugh, but I always tell them, when I opened the door to my office, I was looking outside like, you know, COVID had arms and legs and it was going to capture me, take me away. And so, I mean, I remember just feeling like, whoa, what is happening to the world? And then you look at television and all kinds of stuff was going on, you know, civil unrest and, you know, all the things that were taking place. And it was a lot happening during that time. So you can almost see how people could become anxious, how people could become depressed, you know, how people could just start experiencing a lot of physical symptoms and ailments that they never experienced before. So that was something that me personally, that I definitely experienced during that time.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, it's funny that you say that because I feel like that's a perfect I guess like display of how or why our generation experiences so much anxiety. Because think about it, you come from your generation. Yes, of course, people in your generation had anxiety has always been prevalent, but maybe it wasn't as strong, or you know, less people experience anxiety. You know, times were different, things were different. But during that pandemic, you were kind of like forced in your house and you saw a lot, and it was just a lot. Every day it was something new. Every day it was a lot, right? And then once you got out of that, it was kind of like, you know, yeah, you use social media still. Yeah, you're still watching TV, but you still have life going on. But with my generation, that's pretty much what we see all the time, every day on our phones. You know, we're scrolling on TikTok, and literally one video could be like literally like a dead body, you know, like, and then you scroll up, you like, oh, that's sad. And then you scroll up and then it's like a joke. And then you scroll up and then it's a skit. And you scroll up, it's a baby. And you're like, oh, it's a cute baby, you know? And, you know, it's just constant. And we're taking that in, and it's getting younger and younger and younger. And, you know, and that creates anxiety. That's a lot of overload on your brain, a lot of stimulation, you know, it's a lot to take in. And then anxiety also has a way of kind of like creeping in when you don't expect it. And so I know for me, like I said, my anxiety is more so physical now. And so sometimes I've learned, like, when I don't take time to process some things or something that I just saw or just heard, like, I can feel it later on, you know, and I'm wondering what's going on with me. And it's anxiety, you know, creeping up from the video you watched like 2 hours ago, you know. And so I feel like that's a perfect example of like almost like you got a taste of like, not to like make it seem like that's what our generation, you know, we you know, but like, you know, you got a little taste of what it's like to just be overloaded and constantly fed things.
Overloaded. Yes. And you're right. It was overload because I'm at home. Everybody's at home. We have a large family, you know, and I'm trying to work, and then everybody wants to eat and watch Netflix. You know, it was just like a lot happening at one time. And I remember having to create a small, quiet place where I could work. That was where I worked. When I came out of that quiet space, then that's where I did family. And I had to be very intentional about that. And I think with your generation, I think probably some of what it's going to take is some intentionality, you know, to not be scrolling so much on your phones, to not, you know, because like you said, you're going from happy, sad, scared, and it really kind of desensitizes you because you're just so used to different things popping up. It's like nothing is, you know, nothing phases you, you know. But I wanted to ask you this. What has been, and you probably answered it a little bit, but what has been the hardest part of dealing with your own mental health issues as a Gen Zer?
I feel like for me, the hardest part is, or hardest part was, and still kind of is, honestly, the acceptance of it. Like accepting that these are some things that I struggle with and that I deal with, and not allowing the stigmas to like attach to me, or not getting attached to the stigmas that come with it, right? Like, because when you accept something, it becomes real, and now you have to do the work. Now you have to work on yourself. Now you know what it is, and you have to, be intentional about it. But
Right.
also with that comes like the stigmas, because like, for example, the social anxiety, I felt embarrassed about that and ashamed about it for a very long time, and I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to accept that I had social anxiety. I just kind of wanted to like brainwash myself into like, it's gone. Like it's going to just go away one day, and like not actually do the deep work, like the deep rooted work, that it takes to like work on that and like decrease it until the point where it's on. I didn't want to accept that, because with that in my mind came the stigma of like being the weirdo, or being like, the awkward one, or being the, it's like so many stigmas that are attached with something like that. And it's like, I be that one. Or even like, mood disorder, that's something I just discovered. And, it's something that I called you a few weeks, or I called, Brenae a few weeks ago, and was just kind of telling her like, I don't know how I feel about this, because in my mind, I thought I was going to read books and work out enough and eat all the right foods and do affirmations every day. And one day I'm going to just be good and I'm going to be that Z, but now it's like, okay, it's going to look a little different. I can still do all that, but I may have to take some medication just to kind of even me out. And then, it may have to decrease it slowly and, but surely, then you'll be that person. Or may not even be that person. It may look different. Still be in a better space, but having to accept that is kind of like okay, well, now you kind of feel like, oh, well, now I'm the sensitive one, and now I'm the, like you don't want to be that one, you want to be the tough, the strong one. Tell me nothing, but sometimes it hurts, sometimes it sets me on.
Of course. Yeah. So Bree, what has been the hardest part about dealing with, whatever it is that you deal with, the anxiety and all of that?
Well, I was diagnosed with premenstrual syndrome and PMDD in 2021. And so that's basically like right before your cycle, you start to feel.
Can you unpack that? Tell us what that means. Some people don't know what that means.
Okay. So PMS is a little different. That's basically, the normal mood swings and things like that the women experience before their cycle. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's a severe form of premenstrual syndrome that includes physical and behavioral symptoms. And so I know 2 weeks before my cycle, it's on and cracking. But thankfully I have, my acai, my flow, my damianas, my pampering when it get a little closer, that makes me feel better. And right now, the hardest thing for me is forgiving myself. Because I didn't know earlier on what was going on with me. My mom would say it was a hormonal imbalance, but I'm so hard on myself. So it's forgiving myself for thinking I could have been in a better place, or could have accomplished more, or could have been better in school, or better at work, or better in, ministry, and all of these things, and accepting like, even when you didn't know, you were still succeeding. You were still taking it one step at a time. You were still learning who you were. So that's been the biggest thing for me, just forgiving myself, knowing that failure won't come in the same capacity that it had came before, because now I have more wisdom, more resources, more knowledge about what's going on with me, and I can achieve and accomplish so much more now that I have a better understanding of myself.
Wow. That's something, and people deal with that forgiving self. They deal with that so much. So Paula said, and sadly, some people don't understand or don't know how to handle these things. And it's true, and that's where the stigma just attaches itself to people, because now, like you said, Zion, then that becomes the weird one, the strange one, the quiet one. There was like one thing that in our family we used to say, and that was a huge trigger to Zion. We had to learn. It was, it was a joke, for us, a bad joke, but it was a joke for us. But it was a joke that was, it was very triggering for her. And so we as a family had to learn how not to say that. We had to be, as family, we had to be more intentional, and not, and you can get caught up between being intentional about being helpful, being supportive, and tiptoeing. And that's one of the things that Zion had told us. She said, I don't want you guys to tiptoe around me. I want you to still joke. I want you to still, because we can crack them, right?
Right.
But she's like, I want you guys to still, crack jokes and do things like that. But there were just certain things that were more of triggers for her. And so we had to learn that. We had to learn what those things were. So a lot of that plays into, like Zion said, for her, the acceptance. And then for you, Bree, just the forgiveness, wow, that said a lot. That said a lot. I had some statistics that I wanted to share with everyone. The prevalence of anxiety and depression. So studies indicate that about 36% of Generation Z individuals, that's ages between 18 and 23, report that they experience anxiety, while around 25 report symptoms of depression. That's a lot. That's a lot. 36% of a whole generation, or the people that were that were surveyed anyway. And then 25 of that same group said that they experienced depression. And then here's a big one. The big one is the impact of social media. And I really, we can't blame one thing, but I really do believe that social media has had a big impact on your generation, on all of our generations, honestly, even my generation, because now we are getting so into our phones and, and looking at TikTok and, and on, Facebook and Instagram and all of that. But research shows that about 60% of Gen Zers feel social media negatively impacts their mental health, contributing to feelings of loneliness and anxiety. And I'm pretty sure, especially during the time when Gen Zers were away from their friends, they couldn't be in their social groups, that they felt lonely, and that loneliness kind of moved into anxiety. And then thinking about, like you said, Z, to have to transition back, now the kids that had to go back to school, they had to go back into, how many kids, I work with kids all the time. And so there were kids that told me, I liked being at home, going to school on Zoom. I enjoyed it. I'm like, you did? They were like, I liked it. I didn't, there were some kids that didn't like school. They didn't like being social. They didn't like being around other people. And so it was perfect for them. But they said, yeah, it was hard for them to go back into those social settings. And think about it, it was different. It was different when we started going back into the world. It was different. You had to wear a mask. You really couldn't see each other. You really couldn't really identify. You couldn't hug. You couldn't touch. None of that. It was so different. So different. Everybody was spaced out. I remember when we started going back to church, and our praise team, we'd be like spaced out, and it was just strange. It was really different. And I think now people have kind of broken away from the masks and the spacing, and people are back to hugging, things we did in church. Things we did in church. Oh, that was nice. Things we did in
Thank
church, like
you.
holding hands and making affirmations. We had stopped doing that. Now we hold hands again. Now we hug people. You know, and you know, COVID is still out there, you know, but now we
Yeah.
realize that COVID is going to be a part of our lives. You know, it's going to be like that common cold, you know, or the flu. So those are things that we have to come to accept. So the one other thing I wanted to talk about was suicidal thoughts. So according to the CDC, nearly 10% of Gen Zers had seriously considered suicide, highlighting a significant mental health crisis within this demographic. 10%. You know, and people say 10%, that's not a lot. No, 10% is a lot. You know, 10% is a lot. If you have 50 people standing side by side and you say 10%, five of those people have considered, you know, suicide. And so it all kind of goes back to all the things that we experienced during that time, the loneliness. I thought about people. I did a show one time on people who don't live with anybody, living alone. They didn't have any, and think we couldn't go to people's homes, we couldn't visit, you know, we couldn't have Christmas dinner and Thanksgiving and all the things we were used to doing. You know, I thought about people who lived alone, you know, people who were single and they didn't have a significant other, people who didn't have children or older people, you know, so it was a lot. And just to think about 10% of Gen Zers who were experiencing all of this anxiety and depression and all these things that they had considered, you know, committing suicide. So that's a big thing. That's a huge thing, you know. And so we talk about that. What do you guys think about that?
I think that it is a lot of pressure, especially in our generation, because not only are we trying to find ourselves, we're trying to find our
Mhm.
purpose and what we contribute to the world. And then also we are trying to find and figure out what's going on with our mental health. So um, I would just say that if you are struggling with your mental health, if you are struggling with suicide or suicidal ideation, you are not alone. And it's important that we continue to watch episodes like this, educate ourselves, take the necessary
Right,
vitamins, medication if needed, go to somebody's
right.
church, talk to a pastor. As you can see, co-pastors on here. So there are churches that are advocating for mental health. Just continue to fight
Yes,
for yourself, because we don't got you to leave this earth. Okay, you still got purpose and you
that's
still
right.
have an assignment. So keep going.
Right. That's good. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I agree 100%, Brenae. I think that's alarming, and that's something we have to start really talking about. I think suicide, that's something I've had experience with before. And so I know what it feels like to be at a point where you feel like I don't care about anything in this moment but being out of the misery that I'm in, and that's painful. It's a very painful
Yeah.
place to be, and it's a very scary place to be. And it's important, that we really take our mental health serious, that we don't
Right.
ignore signs. They say don't ignore the signs of the people around you, but also don't ignore the signs within yourself too. If you feel yourself slipping,
Yes.
be mindful of that. Be in tune with yourself. Okay, what do I need to do to start getting back on track? Do I need to talk to somebody? Do I need to just different things that we do that help us? Like, Bree, you have your things that help you, when you feel that time of the month coming. And so yeah, I just feel like it's important to really practice being mindful, because
Yeah.
it's some people that didn't make it, because
Yes.
life sometimes it just hits you, and you don't realize how much
Yes.
stuff you've been carrying with you until you hit that brink, and you're like, okay. I don't think I have anything left. So it's important to just be mindful and check in with yourself consistently.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you two enough. And we just got a message that said we need to do a part 2. We need to do a part 2. We need to dig a little deeper into this because you two were fantastic, and you're both so knowledgeable and so smart, and so transparent. So I appreciate you for sharing, your a bit of your story with us tonight. And I thank you for just being encouraging too, because there's somebody out there who was probably at their wit's end today. They just felt like, you know what, like you said, Z, I just want to be out of pain. I don't want to experience what this is I'm going through right now. I don't want to experience it anymore. And I used to always say, we never want to put a period where there should be a comma, because life happens, but life keeps going on, and we should keep going on as well. Paula said, you two are awesome, and thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Denise West. So they said, thank you guys for being so open about this topic. Yes, you guys are amazing. So I want you to come back. We're going to have another mental health moment coming up probably sometime in November. And we're going to talk about some things, unpack some other subject matters as it relates to mental health. But just give us a 10-second encouraging word for someone who's listening, Z.
10 seconds. Okay. I would say 2 seconds. Okay. Just don't ever give up. That is the most important thing that I've learned. I used to shame myself for having setbacks, but I had to stop using the setbacks to confirm that, like, see, you can't do it. See, you can't do it. I had to start using my comebacks as confirmation of that I can do it and that I'm gonna come back harder every time. And so, you haven't failed until you give up on yourself. So never stop giving up.
That's right. Never give up. Bree, give us 10 seconds.
So I have this slogan that I always say, and it's not time to give up, but readjust, run the course. All right. So don't give up. Keep going. You got this. I believe in you.
You got this. That's right. We got this. So thank you for being here tonight. And like the lady said, don't give up. You got this. You can make it. You can do it. You can push through it. If you just keep pushing, if you keep walking, if you keep breathing, if you call somebody and tell somebody how you're feeling, perhaps you won't have to be in a place where you feel alone. You have help. People love you. We're here. There are phone numbers that you can call, that you can reach out to people, and just tell them where you are. So thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for, yes, we have some phone numbers that we want to put up. Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and then 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You don't have to be in a place where you want to commit suicide in order to call these numbers. There are people that will just talk to you. Call a friend, call a family member, someone that you can trust. But you know what? I hate that we have to end, but we do. But until the next time, you take care and you stay safe. God bless you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Pyro Media Network. For more information, please visit pyromedianetwork.com.